She waited for years to be seen.
Brought to the palace as a child, she learned silence, patience, and restraint.
But now she is no longer a girl, and waiting is no longer enough. He sees her, he wants her, yet fear holds him back.
Between desire and duty, innocence and temptation,
A forbidden tension begins to rise. Because some loves don't start with a touch. They start with resistance.
3 years can change everything, or nothing at all.
3 years ago, Cecilia Venier arrived in Manisa as a frightened 12-year-old slave, torn from everything she knew. Now she is Nurbanu, fluent in Turkish, trained in every art a concubine should master, transformed from a child into a young woman. But in Shehzade Selim's eyes, she remains frozen in time, still the lost little girl who needed protection, still too young, still innocent. And that, more than any chain or any cage, is the cruelest captivity of all. How long can a woman wait for a man to see her? How many times must she prove herself before he opens his eyes? And most dangerously, what happens when patience runs out and desperation becomes strategy? The game is changing, and Nurbanu is learning the most important lesson of the harem.
Sometimes, to be chosen, you must first refuse to wait.
The morning light filtered through the latticed windows of the harem, casting geometric patterns across the silk cushions where Nurbanu sat before a bronze mirror. She studied her reflection with the cold calculation of a general surveying a battlefield. What do I see? Her chestnut hair fell in thick waves past her shoulders, the color rich and warm, like polished mahogany with hints of auburn that caught fire in sunlight. Not the pale blonde that was so prized, but distinctive, memorable. She had learned to oil it with jasmine and rose, so that when she moved, a subtle fragrance followed. Her eyes were her most striking feature. Hazel, a complex blend of green and gold and brown that shifted with her mood in the light. In candlelight, they glowed amber. In daylight, they turned moss green with golden flecks around the pupils. Right now, studying herself critically, they were a stormy mix of both, reflecting the frustration she felt deep in her bones. Her skin remained porcelain pale, barely touched by the Anatolian sun. She'd learned early that fair skin was valued, so she avoided the gardens during midday hours. High cheekbones gave her face structure, elegance. A straight nose, neither too small nor too prominent. Her lips were naturally pink, full enough to be called sensual without being vulgar. When she smiled, which was rare these days, a small dimple appeared in her left cheek. Her hands, once rough from the journey from slavery, were now soft and carefully maintained. Long fingers, delicate wrists adorned with thin gold bangles. Her feet were small, arched, painted with henna in intricate patterns during festivals. I am beautiful, she thought, not from vanity, but from objective assessment. I have learned everything, perfected everything. My Turkish is flawless. I can discuss poetry, philosophy, politics. My music is exquisite. I play the oud, the kanun, and I sing better than half the trained musicians in this palace. I can dance in ways that make strong men weak. I can embroider, compose poetry, recite the Quran. I have transformed myself from a Venetian slave into a perfect Ottoman concubine. So, Why am I still invisible? 3 years. 3 long years of waiting. 3 years of watching other girls, older, younger, prettier, plainer, get summoned to Shehzade Selim's chambers while she remained untouched, uncalled, unnoticed. Well, not entirely unnoticed. He saw her. She knew he did. She caught him watching sometimes, his warm brown eyes following her across a room, before quickly looking away, as if ashamed of being caught. But watching was all he did. He never called for her, never summoned her, never even spoke to her beyond polite, distant pleasantries that could have been addressed to any concubine. Good morning, Nurbanu Hatun. Always formal, always distant, always treating her like a child who needed gentle handling. You're brooding again. Nurbanu turned to find Layla entering their shared quarters. Layla was 17 now, a Greek girl from Crete with dark hair and darker eyes, olive skin, and a quick wit. She was the closest thing Nurbanu had to a friend in this palace of rivals, perhaps because Layla had given up on catching Selim's attention years ago and focused instead on simply surviving with dignity. I'm not brooding, Nurbanu said automatically. I'm thinking.
About him. Again. Still. Layla sat beside her, picking up a comb. Turn around, let me fix your hair. You've been so distracted lately, you forgot to braid it properly.
Nurbanu turned, letting Layla's skilled fingers work through her chestnut waves. The familiar ritual was soothing somehow. 3 years, Nurbanu said quietly. 3 years I've been here, Layla. 3 years of perfecting myself, making myself worthy. And for what? To be ignored while he calls for Latife and Gulbahar and girls who've been here half as long as I have? Layla was quiet for a moment, sectioning Nurbanu's hair into 3 parts. Maybe that's exactly the problem. What do you mean? You're trying too hard. You're so focused on being perfect, on being worthy, that you've forgotten to just be, to exist as yourself, rather than as some ideal you think he wants. I don't know who myself is anymore, Nurbanu admitted. The honesty surprised even her. Cecilia died in the slave markets. Nurbanu was born to please a prince who doesn't even see her. Who am I beyond those 2 things? That, Layla said gently, is what you need to figure out. Because until you do, you'll always be waiting for him to define you. And that's no way to live. Before Nurbanu could respond, the door to their quarters burst open. Mahidevran swept in, all blonde hair and obvious beauty, her silk robes shimmering in the morning light. At 19, she was one of the senior concubines, a Circassian beauty who'd been with Selim several times over the past 2 years. She wore her status like armor, her chin always lifted, her movements deliberately graceful. But unlike Hürrem Sultan, who'd become a true Haseki to Sultan Suleiman, Mahidevran had never quite achieved that elevated status with Selim. She was favored, yes, called for regularly, but never exclusively, never elevated above the others. And that failure aided her, Nurbanu could tell. It made her cruel.
Still here, little Venetian? Mahidevran's voice dripped false sympathy. Still waiting for a summons that will never come.
Nurbanu didn't turn around, keeping her voice level. Good morning, Mahidevran. You're in a pleasant mood today. Did this Shehzadeh call for you last night?
The barb hit its mark. Mahidevran's flushed. As a matter of fact, he did, 2 nights ago, and it was memorable.
I'm sure it was, Nurbanu said dryly. For you, at least. What's that supposed to mean?
Nothing at all. Nurbanu finally turned, meeting Mahidevran's furious gaze calmly. I'm simply glad you had a memorable experience. It must be nice to be memorable.
The implication was clear. If it was so memorable, why hadn't he called her back? Why was it 2 nights ago and not last night? Mahidevran's hands clenched. You little...
Ladies, Fatma Ana's voice cut through the rising tension. The older woman stood in the doorway, her graying hair covered with a modest scarf, her dark eyes missing nothing. At 45, she'd been in the imperial harems for nearly 30 years, first in Topkapı, then here in Manisa. She'd seen countless girls come and go, seen favorites rise and fall. Her word was law in these quarters.
Mahidevran, she continued, her voice stern, I believe you have music lessons this morning. You're already late.
Mahidevran shot Nurbanu one more venomous look before sweeping out, her 2 attendants, girls who followed her everywhere, hoping her favor would translate to their own advancement, scurrying behind her.
After she left, Fatma Ana approached Nurbanu and Layla. That was unwise. I know, Nurbanu said, but I'm tired of her gloating. She gloats because she's insecure, Fatma Ana observed, settling onto a cushion with the slight groan of aging joints. She's been here 2 years and still hasn't secured exclusive favor. She sees you, young, beautiful, accomplished, and she's terrified you'll succeed where she's failed.
I'm not succeeding at anything, Nurbanu said bitterly. He doesn't even see me.
Doesn't he? Fatma Ana's knowing look made Nurbanu pause. Child, I've been in harems longer than you've been alive. I know the signs of a man who's noticed a woman, and our Shehzadeh has noticed you.
Then why doesn't he call for me? That, Fatma Ana said, is a question only he can answer. But I can tell you this, sometimes men avoid what they want most, especially gentlemen like Shehzadeh Selim. They convince themselves they're being noble, when really they're just being afraid.
Afraid of what? Of caring too much, of losing control, of... Fatma Ana paused, choosing her words carefully. Of admitting they need someone. Nurbanu absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. Could it be true? Was Selim avoiding her not because she was unworthy, but because he was afraid of what she represented?
In 3 days, Fatma Ana continued, there will be a performance. All concubines are required to demonstrate their skills. Music, dance, poetry. The Shehzadeh will attend.
He always attends, Nurbanu said. And he always looks through me like I'm made of glass.
Then make yourself impossible to look through, Fatma Ana said. Show him not what you think he wants to see, but what you need him to see. Show him the woman you've become, not the frightened girl you were.
How?
That, my dear, is for you to figure out. Fatma Ana stood, joints creaking again. But I'll give you one piece of advice. Stop trying to be perfect. Perfect is boring. Perfect is forgettable. Be real. Be strong. Be, she smiled slightly, be dangerous.
After the old woman left, Nurbanu sat in silence, thinking.
3 days. She had 3 days to figure out how to make Shehzadeh Selim finally see her, really see her.
Dangerous, Fatma Ana had said. Be dangerous. She looked at herself in the mirror again. Same face, same body. But something had shifted
in her eyes, a new determination, a hardness that hadn't been there before.
Layla, she said quietly, help me for the performance. I want to do something different.
Different how? I don't know yet, but not the usual dance, not the usual song. Something that will make him impossible to ignore.
Layla studied her friend's reflection in the mirror, seeing the change there. You're planning something.
I'm planning to stop being invisible, Nurbanu said. Whatever it takes.
The afternoon sun was merciless, turning the garden into a furnace of heat and fragrance. Most of the concubines had retreated to the cool interior of the harem, but Nurbanu welcomed the solitude that the heat provided. She sat beneath a pomegranate tree, a book of Turkish poetry in her lap, Fuzuli, her favorite, though she wasn't really reading. Her mind was too full of plans, strategies, possibilities.
The performance was in 2 days. 2 days to perfect whatever mad thing she was planning. She still wasn't entirely sure what that was. A dance, yes, but different, bold. Something that would force Selim to see her not as a child, but as a woman.
She'd been working on choreography in secret, practicing late at night when the others were asleep. Movements that were sensual without being vulgar, powerful without being aggressive. She'd been working on a poem too, words that spoke of cages and wings and refusing to be tamed.
They put me in a golden cage,
Fed me honey, called me beautiful, told me I should be grateful for my prison.
but I am not grateful. I am not tame. I am not yours to keep.
The words had poured out of her 3 nights ago, raw and angry, and more honest than anything she'd ever written. She'd set them to music, a haunting melody that merged Ukrainian folk music with Turkish modes, creating something that belonged to neither culture and both.
Would it work? Would it make him see her? Or would it just prove she was too rebellious, too difficult, too much trouble?
I don't care anymore, she realized. I'd rather fail spectacularly than keep fading into invisibility. Reading? The voice made her jump. She looked up to find Shehzade Selim standing a few feet away, partially in shade, looking almost as surprised to see her as she was to see him. Her heart began to race immediately. 3 years of catching glimpses of him across rooms, of hearing his voice in corridors, of dreaming about moments exactly like this. And now here he was, and she had no idea what to say. My Shehzade! She started to rise, the book tumbling from her lap. Don't. He held up a hand. Stay. Please. I didn't mean to disturb you. She settled back onto the bench, acutely aware of how informal she must look. Hair in a simple braid, wearing a light cotton dress instead of formal silks, no jewelry, bare feet tucked under her. Not how a concubine should appear before her master. But Selim himself looked informal. He wore simple white trousers and a loose shirt, no turban. His sandy blonde hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked younger like this, more approachable, and devastatingly handsome. At 26, he was in the prime of manhood. Tall, not as tall as his father, Sultan Suleiman, but tall enough. His build was athletic, but not overly muscular, more the body of a poet or scholar than a warrior. His face was pleasant, with high cheekbones and a neat beard that he kept carefully trimmed. His skin was fair for an Ottoman, his features refined and aristocratic. But it was his eyes that always undid her, warm brown with gold flecks that caught the light. Eyes that seemed sad even when he smiled.
eyes that right now were looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read.
"What are you reading?" he asked, moving slightly closer but still maintaining a respectful distance.
Fuzuli, my Shehzade, his poetry.
His eyebrows rose, sandy blonde, she noticed, matching his hair. "You can read Turkish now?"
There it was, that note of surprise, as if he'd expected her to still be struggling with the language after 3 years, as if he still thought of her as that frightened 12-year-old who'd barely spoken in those early days.
Of course, she said, trying to keep the edge from her voice. I've had 3 years to learn, my Shehzade.
3 years, he repeated, as if the number surprised him. He looked at her more closely, and she saw the exact moment when something shifted in his gaze, when he truly looked at her, not as a memory, but as she was now.
His eyes widened slightly, traveled over her face with new attention, down to where her cotton dress revealed the elegant curve of her collarbone, back up to her hair, catching the auburn highlights in the sun, to her hazel green eyes that were watching him just as intently.
He paused, searching for words. You've grown.
It was perhaps the worst thing he could have said.
Nurbanu felt 3 years of frustration well up in her chest. "I'm 15 now, my Shehzade," she said, her voice carefully neutral despite the anger burning beneath. "Nearly 16. I suppose growth is expected."
15. He said it like he was calculating something, and his expression showed discomfort. Still very young.
And there it is, Nurbanu thought. Still very young, still a child in your eyes.
She stood abruptly, unable to sit still anymore. "I'm old enough to serve in the harem properly, old enough to have perfected every skill required of a concubine, old enough to—" She stopped herself before she said something she'd regret.
"To what?" he prompted gently.
To be in your bed, to give you sons, to be what every other girl in this harem gets to be, seen.
But she couldn't say that. It would be too forward, too desperate.
To no longer be treated as a child, she finished, lifting her chin. I may have arrived here at 12, my Shehzade, but I am not that frightened little girl anymore. 3 years of your harem has ensured that.
Something flickered in his eyes. Was it pain? Guilt? "I never meant to make you feel—" He trailed off, seeming unsure how to finish.
"Invisible?" Nurbanu supplied. "Forgotten? Like I'm still that 12-year-old you spoke to once in a garden and then decided to preserve in amber like some precious but untouchable thing."
His jaw tightened. That's not fair.
Isn't it? She took a step toward him, emboldened by frustration and 3 years of silent suffering. You speak to me maybe twice a year. Polite greetings, distant acknowledgments. Meanwhile, you call for Latife, for Gulbahar, for Mahidevran, for girls who arrived after I did. What am I supposed to think except that I'm somehow insufficient, that there's something wrong with me that makes me unworthy of even the basic attention you give to others?
There's nothing wrong with you, Salim said, his voice rough. That's never been the issue.
Then what is the issue? The question burst from her, raw and desperate. What have I done or not done to deserve 3 years of being ignored?
He ran his hand through his sandy hair, clearly agitated. You were 12 when you arrived, a child, a traumatized child who lost everything. How could I, he gestured helplessly, how could I possibly look at you as anything other than someone who needed protection?
But I'm not 12 anymore. Can't you see that? She gestured to herself, to her woman's body, her adult bearing? Or are you so determined to see me as that frightened child that you refuse to acknowledge who I've become?" "I see you," he said, and there was something desperate in his voice now. "God help me, Nurbanu. I see you. That's exactly the problem." She stopped, stunned. "What?" He closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering courage. When he opened them again, there was something raw in his gaze, vulnerable. "You think I don't notice you? You think I look through you?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "I notice everything. The way your hair catches light, the sound of your voice when you sing in the practice rooms, the graceful way you move through corridors. I notice all of it. Too much of it."
Nurbanu's breath caught. "Then why—"
"Because you were 12, he interrupted. "Because I remember exactly how young and frightened you were. Because every time I think about calling for you, I see that child's face and I feel like a predator." He stepped closer, his warm brown eyes intense. "You say you're 15 now, nearly 16, as if that changes things. But Nurbanu, in my mind, you're still that little girl who needed protection. And I don't know how to reconcile that memory with—" His eyes traveled over her face, her body, "with what I see now."
"Then stop looking at the memory," Nurbanu said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Look at me. Really look at me. Not who I was, who I am." For a long moment they stood frozen. The afternoon heat pressed down on them. Somewhere a fountain burbled. A bird called. The normal sounds of the garden continuing, while this moment stretched between them, taut, fragile, pregnant with possibility.
Selim's gaze dropped to her lips. She saw his throat work as he swallowed.
"You deserve better than me," he said finally, his voice rough. "Better than a prince who drinks too much and writes mediocre poetry and can't even summon the courage to—"
"I don't want better," Nurbanu interrupted. "I want you. I've wanted you for 3 years, even when you ignored me, even when you made me feel invisible, even when I told myself I should give up and find another way to live in this harem. I still want you."
The honesty of it hung between them. She'd said it, finally said it out loud, laid herself bare in a way that terrified her. Selim looked stricken, like she'd wounded him somehow.
"You shouldn't," he said quietly. "You shouldn't want me. I'm weak, Nurbanu. I'm not like my brothers, warriors, conquerors. I'm just a man who wishes he was brave enough to reach for what he wants."
"Then reach," she challenged. "Right now. Reach for me and stop being afraid of ghosts."
For one breathtaking moment, she thought he would. His hand actually rose, trembling slightly, moving toward her face. And then he stopped, drew back. The shutters came down over his eyes.
"You deserve a proper courtship," he said, his voice formal again, distant. "The prince instead of the man. When, if I call for you, it will be done properly, with all the respect and ceremony due to a woman of worth." "I don't want ceremony," Nurbanu said, hearing the desperation creeping into her voice and hating it. "I just want—"
"I know what you want," he cut her gently, "and I'm telling you that you deserve better than what I can give you right now. Better than a confused man who can't even figure out what he feels, let alone how to act on it."
He was retreating, physically stepping backward, putting distance between them, doing what he always did, running from anything real, anything that might hurt.
"The performance," he said, grasping for safer ground. In 2 days. I'm told you'll be demonstrating your skills.
Yes. Her voice came out flat, defeated.
I look forward to it. Formal. Distant. As if the past few minutes hadn't happened at all. Then he turned and walked away, his white shirt bright in the sun, leaving her standing alone beneath the pomegranate tree, with her heart hammering and tears threatening.
She didn't cry, wouldn't give him that. Instead, she stood there, breathing deeply, letting fury slowly replace hurt.
Fine, she thought, fine. If he wants to see me demonstrate my skills, I'll demonstrate them. I'll show him exactly what he's been too afraid to reach for. And then he can live with the knowledge of what he's missing while he drinks himself into oblivion and pretends he's being noble.
2 days. In 2 days, I'll show him something he can't ignore, something he can't pretend away or dismiss as childhood innocence.
In 2 days, I'll show Shehzade Selim exactly what kind of woman he's been too cowardly to claim. She picked up her fallen book, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her, and walked back to the harem with her head held high. Behind her, hidden in the shadow of a colonnade, Selim stood watching her go. His hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. His jaw worked as if he was physically restraining words that wanted to escape. When she disappeared from view, he slumped against a pillar, covering his face with his hands.
"What am I doing?" he whispered to the empty garden. "What the hell am I doing?"
But he knew. He was being exactly what he'd always been. Too afraid to reach for what he wanted. Too caught up in his own head to act. Too convinced of his own unworthiness to believe he deserved anything good.
And Nurbanu, beautiful, strong, honest Nurbanu, was paying the price for his cowardice.
2 days, he thought. In 2 days, I'll have to watch her perform. Have to sit there while she shows me everything I'm too much of a coward to claim. And then what? Will I finally find the courage to act? Or will I let another 3 years pass while I convince myself I'm protecting her, when really I'm just protecting myself?
He didn't have an answer. He only knew that he was drowning, and the one person who could save him was the same person he kept pushing away. The performance hall had been transformed into something magical. Silk curtains in jewel tones, sapphire, emerald, ruby, draped from the ceiling and walls, creating an intimate space within the larger room. Hundreds of oil lamps hung from brass chains, their flames dancing and casting warm, flickering light that made everything glow golden. The air was thick with the scent of roses and jasmine from fresh flowers arranged in large brass vessels. Cushions were arranged in a semicircle, the most elaborate ones, deep blue silk embroidered with gold thread, reserved for Shehzade Selim and his close advisors. The other cushions, slightly less ornate but still beautiful, were for the senior eunuchs and harem officials who had the privilege of attending. Nurbanu stood with the other concubines in the preparation room, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She wore crimson silk, deep blood red, the color of poppies and passion and danger. The kaftan was fitted at the bodice, emphasizing her waist before flowing out in graceful folds. Gold thread formed intricate patterns along the edges, tulips and crescents, Ottoman symbols. The neckline was modest, as required, but the way the silk draped across her shoulders and breasts was somehow more alluring than bearskin would have been. Beneath the kaftan, she wore matching crimson shalvar, loose trousers gathered at the ankle. Her feet were bare,
as was traditional for dance, but her ankles bore thin gold chains that would catch the light with every movement.
Her chestnut hair had been arranged in an elaborate style, mostly loose, cascading down her back in thick waves, but with several small braids woven through that were studded with tiny pearls. Every time she moved her head, the pearls caught the lamplight, creating a subtle shimmer.
Her hazel green eyes were lined with kohl, making them appear larger, more luminous. A touch of rouge on her lips and cheeks, just enough to enhance, not enough to look painted.
She looked, she knew, stunning. But beauty had never been enough. It would never be enough.
"You look like you're preparing for war," Layla whispered, adjusting the final fold of Nurbanu's kaftan.
"I am," Nurbanu said simply. Her voice was steady, but inside, her stomach churned with nerves.
Around them, the other concubines were in various states of preparation. Mahidevran, predictably, had chosen pale blue silk that complemented her blonde hair. She would perform first, a traditional dance, perfectly executed but utterly forgettable. Exactly what Selim expected.
Latife, a petite brunette from Persia who'd recently caught Selim's attention, wore soft pink. She would sing, a sweet voice, pleasant enough, but nothing that would linger in the memory.
Gulbahar, at 23, one of the senior concubines, had chosen deep purple. She would play the kanun and sing, showcasing her musical training. Competent, refined, safe.
They were all safe, all performing to please, all showing Selim exactly what he expected to see. Beautiful, accomplished women who would be grateful for his attention.
None of them were planning to challenge him.
"Are you sure about this?" Layla asked quietly, concern evident in her dark eyes. "What you're planning, it's risky."
I know.
If he takes offense,
"Then at least I'll have an answer," Nurbanu interrupted. "At least I'll know instead of spending another 3 years wondering." Before Layla could respond, Fatma Ana appeared in the doorway. "It's time. The Shehzade has arrived. Mahidevran, you'll perform first, then Latife, then Gulbahar, then—" "I'll go last," Nurbanu said.
Every head in the room turned to stare at her.
"Last," Mahidevran laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "The final position is for the most accomplished performers. You've barely been here 3 years, little Venetian. You should go 3rd or 4th at best."
"Then I'm sure you won't mind giving me the position," Nurbanu said calmly, meeting Mahidevran's furious gaze. "Since you're so confident in your own superiority, let me have the disadvantage of following all of you. If I fail, you can enjoy it all the more."
Mahidevran's eyes narrowed, trying to find the trap in Nurbanu's words. But there wasn't one. Not an obvious one, anyway. "Fine. Go last. Let everyone see how inadequate you are by comparison."
Fatma Ana looked like she wanted to object, but something in Nurbanu's expression stopped her. "Very well, last position. But Nurbanu," she moved closer, dropping her voice so only Nurbanu could hear. "Be careful. Whatever you're planning, remember that the line between boldness and recklessness is thin."
"I'll be careful," Nurbanu promised, but they both knew it was a lie.
Selim sat on the central cushions, trying to appear interested and failing. Ibrahim Pasha sat to his right, his closest friend and advisor, who'd been with him since childhood. Ibrahim was lean and sharp-featured, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," Ibrahim murmured.
"I would rather be anywhere else," Selim admitted, keeping his voice low. "These performances are torture.
watching women parade themselves like horses at auction, desperate for my attention.
It's tradition, and it's your duty to appreciate the skills of your household.
I know. Selim shifted uncomfortably on the cushions. He'd fortified himself with wine before coming, not enough to be obviously drunk, but enough to take the edge off his discomfort. Let's just get through this.
The lamps were dimmed slightly. Musicians took their positions. Ney flute, kanun, death drum, kamencha. Fatma Ana stepped forward and bowed.
My Shehzadeh, the concubines of your household are honored to demonstrate their accomplishments for your pleasure. First, Mahidevran Hatun will dance.
Mahidevran entered with practiced grace. Her blonde hair was elaborately styled, her pale blue silk catching the lamplight beautifully. She was, objectively, stunning. The music began, a traditional melody, familiar and safe. Mahidevran danced with technical precision. Every movement was perfect, every step exactly where it should be. Her arms moved with fluid grace. Her spins were controlled, her expressions appropriately demure, yet inviting.
It was flawless.
It was also utterly forgettable.
Selim watched politely, his mind already drifting. He'd seen this dance 100 times. Different performers, same movements, same safe choreography designed to please without challenging. When it ended, he applauded dutifully.
Beautiful, he said, because it was expected. Your skill is evident, Mahidevran Hatun. She bowed, her smile triumphant as she glanced at the other waiting concubines. See, that look said, this is how it's done. Perfectly, safely, successfully. Latife performed next. Her song was sweet and pleasant, like spring rain, gentle, forgettable. Céline applauded again, complimented her voice, and tried not to let his attention drift to the wine pitcher nearby.
Gulbahar followed with her kanun performance. She was genuinely talented, her fingers dancing across the strings with practiced ease. The melody was complex, showcasing her years of training. Selim actually paid attention to this one, appreciating the musicianship, even if it didn't move him emotionally.
Several more concubines perform. Singing, dancing, poetry recitation. All lovely, all accomplished, all completely interchangeable in his wine-fogged memory.
He was beginning to think the evening would end without incident when Fatma Ana announced, "And finally, my Shehzadeh, Nurbanu Hatun will dance and sing for your pleasure."
Selim sat up straighter, his attention suddenly focused. He hadn't seen her in the 2 days since their encounter in the garden, had deliberately avoided the harem common areas, afraid of seeing her and having to confront the confusion of emotions she stirred in him.
The lamps dimmed further until the room was nearly dark. Then, slowly, a single spotlight of lamplight illuminated the center of the performance area.
And she entered. Selim's breath caught in his throat.
She wore crimson silk that seemed to glow like living fire in the lamplight. The color was bold, aggressive even. No soft pastels for her. This was the red of blood and poppies and sunset skies. The caftan fit her perfectly, emphasizing curves he'd tried very hard not to notice in the garden. Her chestnut hair fell in thick waves down her back, catching auburn highlights that made it look like molten bronze. Those hazel green eyes, lined with kohl, found his immediately across the room. And she didn't look away.
Didn't lower her gaze demurely like the others had. Didn't offer a submissive smile or a bow of supplication. She looked directly at him, a challenge, an invitation, a promise, and a threat, all at once. The music began, not a familiar melody, something different. The ney flute's haunting voice started alone, playing a tune that sounded almost Ukrainian, foreign, exotic. Then the kanun joined, weaving Turkish modes into the foreign melody, creating something that belonged to neither culture and both. Nurbanu didn't move at first. She simply stood in the center of the light, her head bowed, her arms at her sides. The stillness was so complete, so deliberate, that every eye in the room was drawn to her.
Selim found he couldn't look away even if he wanted to.
Slowly, so slowly, she raised her head. Her eyes found his again, held his gaze, and then her arms began to rise, graceful as wings unfurling.
What followed was unlike anything Selim had ever seen in a harem performance.
This wasn't the practiced, safe choreography of traditional Ottoman dance. This was something raw, personal, real.
She moved like fire given form, unpredictable, mesmerizing, dangerous. Her arms traced patterns in the air that seemed to tell a story without words, a story of captivity and freedom, of rage barely contained beneath grace, of a soul refusing to be tamed.
The crimson silk moved with her like something alive, revealing and concealing in turns. Nothing immodest, everything was covered, but the suggestion, the hint of the body beneath, God, it was more powerful than bare skin would have been. She spun, and the silk billowed around her like blood and water. She dropped low, back arched in a pose that was equal parts supplication and defiance. She rose again, arms spread wide as if embracing the whole world or pushing it away. Selim couldn't tell which. Her hair swayed with each movement, those auburn hints catching fire in the lamplight. Her face was transformed, no longer the girl trying to please, but a woman claiming her power. Her hazel green eyes blazed, sometimes catching the light to appear more green, sometimes more gold, always intense. And then she stopped dancing and began to sing. Her voice rose above the instruments, not loud but clear and haunting. The words were in Turkish, but the melody had that same Ukrainian-Turkish hybrid quality as the dance. And the lyrics, they put me in a golden cage, fed me honey, called me beautiful, told me I should be grateful for my prison. But I am not grateful. I am not tame. I am not yours to keep. I am a bird who remembers the sky, and I will sing my own song, whether you listen or not. The room was utterly silent, except for her voice and the instruments. Selim felt as if she'd reached into his chest and grabbed his heart. These weren't traditional verses. She'd written them herself. This wasn't a performance designed to please him. This was a declaration, a manifesto, a refusal to be diminished or dismissed or kept at arm's length. I am not yours to keep. The words hit him like a physical blow. The music swelled. Her voice soared, carrying notes that made the lamplight seem to shiver. She moved again, faster now, more intense.
The gold chains on her ankles caught the light with every step. The pearls in her hair sparkled like stars. She was magnificent, terrifying, like watching a goddess or a demon. He couldn't decide which.
And when she reached the climax of the dance, she didn't bow submissively like the others had. She stood tall, arms spread, head thrown back, as if daring the world to try to cage her again.
The music stopped. Nurbanu lowered her arms slowly, brought her gaze back to Selim, and smiled. Not a submissive smile, not an inviting smile, a knowing, challenging smile that seemed to say, I showed you who I am. Take it or leave it. I know my worth. Then she inclined her head, barely, the minimum respect required, and walked off the performance area with her head held high.
The room was silent for 3 heartbeats. Then applause erupted. Not just polite applause like the others had received, but genuine appreciation. Even the other concubines, many of whom clearly hated her, couldn't deny what they just witnessed.
But Selim didn't applaud. He sat frozen, his hands gripping the cushion beneath him so hard his knuckles were white. His heart was hammering, his mouth had gone dry. Every nerve in his body was screaming.
What the hell was that? Ibrahim leaned over, his voice low and amused. Well, that was certainly different.
Different. It was so much more than different. It was a revelation, a challenge, a slap in the face, and a caress all at once.
She wasn't asking for his approval anymore, wasn't begging for his attention, wasn't trying to prove herself worthy. She'd shown him exactly who she was, take it or leave it, and made it clear that she would survive either way.
I am not yours to keep.
The words echoed in his mind, taunting him.
The performances are concluded, my Shehzade, Fatma Ana said, bowing. Would you like to offer comments? Selim cleared his throat, trying to find his voice. He needed to say something, something diplomatic, something that revealed nothing of the chaos raging inside him.
All the performances were impressive, he managed, his voice rougher than intended. The concubines of my household are clearly well-trained and accomplished. My compliments to their instructors.
Polite, neutral, revealing nothing.
But as the concubines filed out, as the hall began to empty, Selim's eyes followed one figure in crimson silk until she disappeared through the doorway.
After everyone left, Ibrahim remained, studying his friend's face.
You're going to call for her, he said. Not a question.
Selim started, then stopped. Was he? Should he?
That performance, those words, that look. She'd thrown down the gauntlet, challenged him openly, shown him what he was missing while he hid behind his fears and his wine.
I need to think, Selim said finally.
You've been thinking for 3 years, Ibrahim pointed out gently. Maybe it's time to stop thinking and start acting.
After Ibrahim left, Selim sat alone in the performance hall, surrounded by dying lamplight and the lingering scent of roses.
He could still see her, crimson silk and defiant eyes, and that smile that had made his heart stop.
I am not yours to keep.
No, he whispered to the empty room. You're not. But God help me. I want to try anyway.
Selim lay on silk cushions, a cup of wine balanced on his chest,
staring at the painted ceiling of his chambers. Beside him, Latife slept peacefully, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her breathing soft and even.
He'd called for her 3 hours ago, had taken her to his bed, had done all the things that were expected of a Shehzadeh with his concubine,
and felt nothing.
Well, not nothing. Physical pleasure, yes. Release, yes. But emotionally, nothing. She was pleasant, agreeable. She'd made all the right sounds, said all the right things, responded exactly as she'd been trained to respond.
It had been utterly hollow.
He took a drink of wine, careful not to wake her. She deserved better than to wake and find him brooding beside her, already regretting the summons.
But he couldn't help it, because the entire time, even during the most intimate moments, he'd been thinking of someone else.
Crimson silk, hazel green eyes, a voice that sang of refusing to be caged.
This is pathetic, he thought. You're lying with one woman while obsessing over another. What kind of man does that?
a confused one, a cowardly one, a man who kept choosing safe, easy options because he was too afraid to reach for what he actually wanted.
It had been a week since Nurbanu's performance, 7 days during which he deliberately avoided her, deliberately called for other concubines, deliberately tried to prove to himself that she wasn't special, that she was just another pretty face, that his obsession was just a phase that would pass if he ignored it long enough.
It wasn't working.
If anything, it was making it worse. Every woman he called for just highlighted how different Nurbanu was, how much more alive he felt when he thought about her, how empty everything else seemed in comparison. This is madness, he thought. She's 15, a child. You should be protecting her, not lusting after her.
But she wasn't a child. That performance had proven it beyond any doubt. That had been a woman standing there in crimson silk, a strong, powerful, dangerously intelligent woman who knew exactly what she was doing when she looked him in the eye and sang about refusing to be kept.
He'd tried to talk to Ibrahim about it, had gotten drunk enough to voice his confusion.
I don't understand what I feel, he'd admitted, wine making him reckless with honesty. It's not just physical attraction. If it were just that, I could scratch the itch and move on like I do with the others. But with Nurbanu, it's everything. I think about her constantly, her voice, her eyes, the way she challenged me in the garden. That damn performance, I can't get her out of my head.
Then call for her, Ibrahim had said, as if it were simple.
I can't.
Why not?
Because, Salim had struggled to articulate it, because she matters. The others don't matter, they're pleasant diversions. But Nurbanu, if I call for her, it will mean something. It will change things. And I don't know if I'm ready for that.
You're 26 years old and you don't have an heir, Ibrahim had pointed out bluntly. You can't afford to not be ready. Your position is precarious enough as it is. Gentle Selim, poet Selim, drunk Selim. If you don't start building your own power base with sons, you'll be the first casualty when the succession wars begin.
Salim had known his friend was right. Politically, dynastically, strategically, he needed heirs. Needed to be with young, fertile concubines who could give him sons.
But that wasn't why he wanted Nurbanu. It had nothing to do with heirs or strategy or politics.
He wanted her because she made him feel alive, because she challenged him, because when he looked at her, he saw someone who could be his equal instead of just his possession.
and that terrified him.
Beside him, Latife stirred slightly in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. He looked at her, pretty, pleasant, perfectly content to be chosen. She would never challenge him, never demand more than he was willing to give, never make him question himself or push him to be better.
She was safe, and safety, he was beginning to realize, was just another word for emptiness. He carefully extricated himself from the bed, pulling on a robe. Latifa didn't wake. She'd sleep until a eunuch came to escort her back to the harem quarters in the morning. Selim walked to his window, looking out at the darkened palace grounds. Somewhere out there, in the harem quarters, Nurbanu was probably sleeping. Or maybe she was awake too, lying in the darkness, wondering why he kept choosing everyone but her. I'm hurting her, he realized. Every time I call for someone else, I'm telling her she's not good enough, not worthy, not wanted. And it's a lie. It's all a lie. Because I want her more than I've ever wanted anyone. So why couldn't he just reach for her? Fear. Always fear. Fear of caring too much. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of admitting he needed someone. Fear of being the gentle, weak prince his brothers mocked and his father worried about.
But what if? A small voice whispered in his mind. What if being vulnerable is actually a kind of strength? What if admitting you need someone is braver than pretending you need no one?
He didn't have an answer. He only knew that he was tired. Tired of wine that didn't numb anything. Tired of meaningless encounters that left him feeling more alone. Tired of being afraid. Tomorrow, he promised himself. Tomorrow, I'll figure this out. Tomorrow, I'll decide. But tomorrow came and went. And the next day. And the next. And still, he didn't call for her. Still, he chose safety over truth. Emptiness over risk. The palace library was one of Selim's favorite refuges. It was a small room, intimate rather than grand, with walls lined floor to ceiling with books. Manuscripts in Arabic, Persian, Turkish, poetry, philosophy, history, science. The smell of old paper and leather bindings. The quiet broken only by the occasional rustle of pages or the distant call of the muezzin. He came here when wine wasn't enough to quiet his thoughts, when the weight of being a Shehzadeh, third son, unlikely to inherit, living in the shadow of warrior brothers, became too heavy.
Today, he'd come seeking solace in Rumi. The Sufi poet had a way of articulating truths that Selim couldn't find words for himself. He pulled a familiar volume from the shelf and settled into a cushioned alcove, letting the afternoon light from the tall window illuminate the pages.
Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray. The words mocked him, because what he loved, or was beginning to love, he kept pushing away. He was so absorbed in reading that he didn't hear the library door open, didn't hear the soft footsteps approaching. Didn't know he wasn't alone until a flash of movement caught his peripheral vision. He looked up, and there she was.
Nurbanu stood across the room, her back to him, reaching for a book on a high shelf. She was on her toes, one arm stretched upward, completely unaware of his presence.
Selim froze, his book forgotten in his lap. The late afternoon light from the windows bathed her in golden radiance. She wore pale green silk, modest
properly cut, covering everything it should cover. But the way the light filtered through the fabric, he could see the outline of her body. Not explicitly, not vulgarly, but enough. The elegant curve of her spine as she stretched upward, the delicate architecture of her shoulder blades moving beneath the silk, the narrow indent of her waist, impossibly slim. He could probably span it with his hands. And then the gentle flare of her hips.
She shifted her weight, still reaching for the book, and the movement made the silk pull taut across her backside. Round, full, womanly curves that had nothing to do with childhood and everything to do with...
Selim forced himself to breathe, to look away, to think of something else.
But his eyes wouldn't cooperate. They traveled down the length of her, taking in details his mind had been refusing to acknowledge. The turn of her ankle in delicate slippers, the graceful length of her calves suggested by the drape of her shalvar, the way her chestnut hair fell in a thick braid down her back, ending at the small of her back, where the silk gathered and...
This is madness, he thought. You shouldn't be looking at her like this.
But another voice, quieter but more honest, whispered, "She's not 12 anymore. You're not looking at a child. You're looking at a woman." She was still struggling with the book. It was just slightly too high, and she was too proud to fetch a stool. She raised herself higher on her toes, and the movement did something to her entire silhouette that made his breath catch. The silk stretched across her shoulders, revealing the delicate muscles working beneath. Her neck, long and graceful as a swan's, extended as she reached higher. He found himself staring at the vulnerable hollow at its base, where her pulse would be beating.
Where, if he was close enough, he could press his lips and feel her heartbeat against his mouth.
God help me.
She got the book, finally grasped it, and pulled it down with a small sound of triumph.
And turned around.
Her hazel green eyes, more green in this light, with golden flecks catching the sun, went wide with shock. The book slipped through her suddenly nerveless fingers and hit the floor with a loud thud that seemed to echo in the quiet library.
"My Shehzadeh!" The words came out breathless. Startled, her hands flew up to smooth her caftan, check her hair, automatic gestures of a woman caught unprepared. I didn't know you were here."
Selim stood slowly, setting his own book aside. His heart was hammering. "I didn't mean to startle you."
"How long have you been?" She trailed off, and he saw color rising in her cheeks. Had she felt his gaze? Known he was watching?
"Not long," he lied. "I was reading."
She bent to retrieve the fallen book, and the movement made her caftan gap slightly at the neckline, not enough to be improper, just enough that he caught a glimpse of the hollow of her throat, the delicate line of her collarbone.
He forced his eyes away, looking instead at the bookshelf behind her. But then she straightened, and the afternoon sun streaming through the window behind her created a halo effect that made her hair glow like molten bronze and outlined her figure through the thin silk in a way that should be illegal.
"I should go," Nurbanu said, still flustered. "I didn't mean to disturb your reading."
"Don't." The word came out more forcefully than he intended. "Please stay. There's no reason you can't read here too."
She hesitated, clutching her book to her chest. The gesture pressed her arms against her breasts in a way that made them more prominent and...
Stop looking. There are cushions by the window, he said, his voice rough. The light is good there.
He gestured to the alcove across the room. Safe distance.
But Nurbanu didn't move toward it. She stood in that shaft of golden sunlight, looking at him with those extraordinary hazel green eyes that seemed to see straight through him.
"You've been avoiding the harem," she said quietly. "Not an accusation, just an observation."
"I've been busy," he said. It wasn't quite a lie. Of course. She looked down at her book. Governing takes time. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable exactly, but charged, heavy with things neither of them was saying. Salim took a step toward her. He didn't plan to. His feet just moved of their own accord. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air between them. 10 feet, 8 feet, 6 feet. Close enough now to smell her. Roses and jasmine and something sweet beneath. Honey, maybe, from afternoon tea. "Your performance," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. 2 weeks ago. She looked up at him. "What about it?" It was... He searched for words that wouldn't reveal too much. "Remarkable." "Remarkable?" She repeated the word as if tasting it. "Is that good or bad?" "Different," he amended, "from the others. You didn't perform to please."
"No," she agreed. "I didn't."
"Why?"
She met his gaze directly, bold. "Because I'm tired of pretending to be something I'm not. Tired of trying to fit into what I think you want. If you can't accept who I actually am," she lifted her chin, "then there's no point in performing at all." The honesty of it took his breath away. He took another step. 5 feet now. Close enough to see the exact pattern of gold and green in her irises. Close enough to see her pulse jumping at the base of her throat.
"And who are you?" he asked quietly. "Actually?"
"I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I'm trying to figure it out. Trying to be more than just a girl waiting to be chosen."
4 feet. The air between them felt thick, charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks.
"Nurbanu," he started, not knowing how to finish. "Don't," she interrupted softly. "Don't say whatever you're about to say. Don't explain or apologize or make promises you won't keep. Just be here. Now. With me." 3 feet. His hand rose. Slowly. Giving her time to step back. To refuse. She didn't move. His fingertips brushed her cheek. The lightest contact. Skin on skin for the first time in 3 years. She gasped softly. Her eyes fluttered closed for just a moment, and she leaned into his touch. Barely, just the slightest pressure, but enough. So soft. Her skin was impossibly soft, like silk over warm marble. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and he felt her tremble. Her eyes opened. Those hazel green depths were closer than they'd ever been. He could see everything in them. Confusion, want, hope, fear, all tangled together. Beautiful, he thought. When did she become so beautiful? His other hand rose to cup her face with both hands now, cradling her head gently, his thumbs stroking along her jawline. Her breathing had quickened. He could see her chest rising and falling beneath the green silk, could feel the warmth of her skin under his palms. She raised her hands, hesitant, uncertain, and placed them flat against his chest.
not pushing away, just touching, feeling his heartbeat, which was hammering hard enough that she must be able to feel it.
Selim, she breathed, using his name, not his title.
The sound of it, his name from her lips, undid something in him.
He leaned closer, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away.
She didn't.
His forehead touched hers, just that. Just their foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. So close, he could count her eyelashes.
"What are we doing?" she whispered.
I don't know, he whispered back.
Her hands moved from his chest to his shoulders, tentative, exploring. Her fingers traced the line of his collarbone through his shirt, and he shivered.
His hands slid from her face to her neck, his thumbs finding the pulse points there, racing just like his own. Down to her shoulders, feeling the delicate bones beneath silk and skin.
"We should stop," he murmured, even as his hands moved to her waist.
Should we? Her voice was barely audible.
Someone could come in.
Then let them. The boldness of it, from her, from sweet Nurbanu, who'd been so careful for 3 years, made his blood sing. He pulled her closer, not roughly, but deliberately, until there was no space between them at all, until her body was pressed against his, from chest to hip to thigh.
She made a small sound, surprise and want combined, and her arms went around his neck.
"This," something in him whispered, "this is what I've been avoiding. This feeling, this need, this absolute certainty that if I kiss her, nothing will ever be the same."
He tilted his head. She tilted hers. Their lips were so close now, just a breath apart. He could feel the warmth of her mouth, could taste the honey on her breath.
"Nurbanu," he breathed one last time. "Yes," she whispered. "Please, yes." The distance between them shrank to nothing. A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. To be continued in episode 3. One breath away from a kiss that could change history. One knock away from heartbreak. What happens when destiny interrupts desire? Can love survive when fate has other plans? The palace holds its breath. So should you. Episode 3 will reveal secrets, test loyalties, and prove that in the Ottoman harem, nothing is more dangerous than hope. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Your voice keeps this story alive.